Hello, everybody, and welcome to Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodities space. My name is Jesse Day. Before we dive in, standard disclaimer: nothing here is investment advice. Do your own due diligence. And today's guest is the CEO of Dolly Varden Silver, a mineral exploration company focused on advancing its 100% held Kitsault Valley project located in the Golden Triangle of British Columbia. It's Shawn Khunkhun. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Jesse.
Great to have you on. I want to get started with a broad overview of the silver space, get your current assessment. What are the main themes and trends you're currently watching when it comes to silver that you think more investors should be paying attention to?
I think we're at a time right now in the precious metals market where gold has put in all-time highs in all currencies, and silver has lagged. Silver is up, is beating gold's performance slightly this year. I think it's up around 25%, whereas gold's up 18%. But historically, silver should be outperforming. If gold is up 20%, silver should be up 60%. So I think in that we're lagging, and therein lies the opportunity. Silver has yet to take out its old historic highs, and I think so. I think that's the big key takeaway for me is if I'm looking to get precious metals exposure, there's two metals to own, gold and silver. I have the opportunity with silver lagging gold.
Yeah, absolutely. A good point there. I mean, silver's been very undervalued for some time now. I think the issue is people are having trouble maintaining the required patience, especially in our day and age of social media. Something I actually want to talk about later in the interview. But first, speaking of social media, I want to touch on a tweet you made recently. You said there is no substitute for silver. India and the solar industry represent 35% of the demand. We have had 500 million ounces of demand over what was mined in the past 2 years, creating back-to-back years of deficit. $50 next, question mark. So a lot to unpack there. I want to start by honing in on the demand coming from India. The solar story is being widely discussed. If you think it's important to touch on that, feel free. But I'm wondering, when it comes to India as a part of the silver story, what is it you're seeing there?
Okay. Well, if you look at India specifically, it's no secret that Indians have for many, 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 many years, thousands of years, had a strong affinity to gold. And I think with the recent all-time highs in the price of gold, it's forced some Indian gold buyers into the silver market. So I think it's just a function of price. I think the other thing that occurred was back in November of 2021, the Securities and Exchange Board of India launched an ETF. And that facilitated the buying of bullion, specifically silver bullion, for the Indian consumer over 2 years ago. So I think that's really made it easier to transact. And then getting back to the theme of gold being expensive, and in addition, for investment purposes, a lot of Indians go to gold as jewelry. And because of recent high prices, particularly for the younger generation, it's a lot more realistic for the earlier consumer to purchase silver jewelry versus gold jewelry. And then I think the last point is the duty or the levy on imports. Moving from 7.5% to 12.5%, that 5% move, in addition to being priced as all-time highs in rupees, has just made it 5% even more expensive. So I think for the billion purchaser in India, silver is so attractive. And I do think that whether we're talking about the Chinese investor or the Indian investor, they're much more price sensitive. And I think they see the opportunity in silver, trading at only 60% of its all-time highs versus gold putting in new all-time highs.
Well, I want to unpack the second half of that tweet. Walk us through the back-to-back years of deficit for silver supply and your price target for silver up ahead. Is $50 the number you're looking at? Obviously, timing the market is impossible, but with the way things are moving at the moment and the tailwinds currently working in silver's favor, do you see that happening this year, next year? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we're at a point right now where we're mining less than a billion ounces of silver. Depending on where you're getting your information, some reports are looking at 822 million ounces on a mining basis. If you factor in recycling, it takes you to, a billion ounces. We're getting, a billion to a billion three demand consistently over the last couple of years, with this year looking like we could go up to a billion five. And so, I look at the growing industrial demand, the growing investment demand, and I'm looking at mine supply, particularly on the primary silver mines that make up about 20% of the market. It tells me that prices are going a lot higher. Now, I throw out the number 50 because we've seen copper, we've seen gold go to new all-time highs. And, $50 is the all-time high in silver. Now, some would argue, going back to when silver first went to 50 in and around 1980, that was a very special set of circumstances. You had the famous Hunt brothers who'd cornered the market, and some call that move almost an artificial spike high, and they didn't put a lot of weight into that. But I think where that myth has been debunked is silver going back there in April of 2011. And so we've had a situation where silver has gone to that level twice, and I am convinced we go back there. And I think we go through there, and I could see a universe where, I throw out the number 50 and the question mark, and I don't think it's a matter of if, I think it's a matter of when. But really, I think silver goes through 50. Now, what's interesting, though, is we in the silver community, whether you're an exploration company, a development company, or a producer, we don't need $50 silver. Give us $30 silver, and almost every silver project out there can make money.
Yeah, very good points there, especially about the Hunt brothers, the original silver squeeze. A lot of people say, well, that didn't count, but it seems they don't even realize silver went back around $50 in 2011. People seem to leave that out of the equation for some reason. I want to talk about de-dollarization. This is a growing trend that seems to be accelerating. I want to give you a quote from Putin at St. Petersburg International Economic Forum last week. He said, "BRICS is working on our own independent payment system, free from political pressure, abuse, and external interference." Do you think this payment system could involve gold? And is the de-dollarization story accelerating faster than most people anticipated?
You mentioned earlier about the world we live in and people being impatient. So I think the answer to the second part of that is no. It's not happening fast enough for those who are waiting for this de-dollarization. I talked to investors that were convinced that this would have accelerated going back to 1971. The fact that we've been off a gold standard in the U.S., people have been very, very surprised that the U.S. Specifically the dollar has been the reserve currency, and it's taken us this many decades to move away from it. I believe, like, if you take Jim Rickards, for instance, Rickards talks about a potential $27,000 an ounce if we get back to a place where we move into a quasi gold standard where 40% of, let's say, the US dollar is backed by gold. If we get even 20%, we're talking about, $13,000 an ounce, right? I can't imagine what a 100% gold standard would look like. So, look, I can see gold playing a role. Why else are countries in the East, particularly China, Russia, India, accumulating so much gold? Why are countries moving away from US dollars? And it's not just gold they're buying farmland, they're buying commodities, it's a hard asset theme. And it's something that, look, when the Hunt brothers were cornering the silver market, I was just being born. So I'm not going to pretend that I can talk to the events of that time. But when I got into the mining business, the junior mining business in and around 2004, the theme of de-dollarization and the theme of, gold moving from west to east was already alive. And we went from a place where central banks went from being net sellers up until, the famous UK Gordon Brown sale of half of England's gold at 250 an ounce US dollar, to an era and a decade where central banks went from sellers to buyers. And now we're seeing that, intensify. We're seeing countries specifically like China, growing their gold reserves by 10x. But they're not alone. There's a whole host of countries, particularly in and around Southeast Asia, that are doing the same thing.
Very interesting thoughts there. I do want to break down the social media aspect of the investment world, particularly when it comes to silver and the impatience that you mentioned, because people are so caught up in the day-to-day price action. I see this in things like uranium as well, that they celebrate, they prognosticate, they try to call what day the next price is going to be. They throw a party when silver hits $30, but in reality, that's in nominal terms. If we adjust for inflation, it's actually not some sort of, it's just a number at the end of the day. So maybe for those, because I get a lot of comments, people watch videos on silver and they're very distraught over the price action, and they want their payoff. Obviously, the reason to stack physical isn't to get a payday. It's to remove your wealth from the financial system and to have an insurance policy. In my opinion, anyways, people have a different approach to it. Maybe if you're in the ETFs or something, you have a little bit of a different mindset. But I'm wondering what your thoughts are there, and how you think people should be looking at it, and how they could stay grounded and focus on the long-term thesis instead of getting caught up in all that noise.
That's a really good question. And I think, we live in this instant gratification world. It's funny because, we saw some recent phenomenons like the meme stocks, where the meme stock communities talked about having diamond hands, when in reality, when I think of diamond hands, I think of famous speculators, a guy like Warren Irwin, who was talking about uranium. You mentioned uranium. Well, Warren was talking about uranium when it was $17, right? And, took a big position in NextGen under 40 cents. And, that's how wealth is created. Wealth is created by taking a very long position, being a contrarian, being early. I go back to the silver squeeze movement in and around January of 2021. And, there was a lot of disappointment and a lot of frustration when silver failed to break $30. And, for me, I went back a year before and I saw a 3-year trailing price of 16. So we had doubled. And that's significant and that's meaningful. And, look, the analogy that I was taught by traders and mentors and people that had came before me is, think like the longer the base, right? Like, think of it as you're putting gasoline in your car. Okay. Or maybe what would be more appropriate is charging your battery today, but putting gas in your car for my generation. And the more you fuel that up, the longer the base, the further the run, right? And so for me, if we look at gold from 2013 to 2019, we were base building between $1,100 and $1,300 an ounce. So when we finally broke out, we went from 1,300 to 2,000 in a year. Silver made that same move in a matter of weeks in the summer of 2020. We went from a $12 low, a COVID low in April, to a $30 spike high, right? And the other thing that I could have talked about when we talked about Indian demand is, because of the pandemic, because of supply chain disruptions, there was a lot of pent up demand for everything, including silver, that wasn't fulfilled during 2020, 2021. You had mine disruptions. So a lot of that demand came into the market when the supply chains opened up, right? And I think, to get back to your original question, though, how do you teach patience? It's why most people lose in the stock market, right? Most people feel like there's less, the higher the price, less risk, and people want to pile on. And that's where you get these blow off tops. The stock market is the only market in the world when something is on sale, nobody wants it. And so and that's why we have very few legendary investors. And in the mining space, I can count them on one hand, right? So, um, Rick Rule says it best, be a contrarian or be a victim.
Yeah, absolutely. And he also is very excited about the silver space right now because of how unloved it is. And so taking that contrarian bet seems to make a lot of sense at this point in time. I want to shift over to discussing Dolly Varden Silver. You made an announcement on May 21st that you're commencing your 2024 drill program. But before we dive into that, let's set the stage by starting with your exploration activities from in 2023 and what you've accomplished at your properties so far to date.
Yeah, listen, for anybody who doesn't know the Dolly story, the company, the history, we're in a safe location. We're in Canada. We're in an area that they refer to as the Golden Triangle. It's one of the richest gold, silver, and copper mining districts on the entire planet. And there has been a theme that's been occurring up in the Golden Triangle, which is referred to as the reawakening of past treasures. So this Dolly Varden silver mine, it used to be the richest mine in the British Empire. It was Canada's third largest silver mine. So the opportunity that we as a team came into here is we thought we were moving into a universe where, because of growing industrial demand, growing investment demand, that finding silver ounces was going to be very difficult. So our vision was, let's go into an area. We refer to them in the mining industry as brownfields projects, so projects that have been in production. Because Jesse, and this is something that I've been in the mining industry for 20 years, I didn't learn this until the last few years. The most challenging thing in mining is access. It's not capital, it's not people, it's not grade, it's access. You look at Cobre Panama, right? You look at some of these great projects throughout the world. It's access. So finding a site that was a producer tells me that the local communities, whether they're the locals in Stewart, in Terrace, whether it's the Nishka, the local indigenous, they want the mine. They're used to mining opportunities and activities around them, right? And it's a source of employment, it's a source of wealth. And so, we found a brownfields project, and the goal was, can we expand and grow? There's another theme in mining where the best place to look for ore is next to a mine, right? So we came into this opportunity because we thought, with new exploration methods, higher metal prices, better access in terms of infrastructure, we could build on that rich history. And so what we've done is we've put together a tremendously large resource. We've got around 64 million ounces of silver and 1 million ounces of gold. It's really, really high grade. If we express this as a silver equivalent, it's close to 150 million ounces of silver EQ in all categories at over 400 grams per ton. So it's one of the richest projects from a grade perspective. And, our team has made some breakthroughs on the exploration side. So you talked about, what did you accomplish in 2023? Well, both in 2022 and in 2023, the best drill intercepts in the entire Golden Triangle. So this is an area where the richest 20 kilometers of gold and silver mineralization anywhere on the planet came from Dolly Varden. So we've made discoveries, we've made acquisitions, we've got a high grade resource. And what we're doing right now is we have 3 drill rigs that have been turning for about a month. And their goal is to make new discoveries and to continue to further expand and extend known deposits.
Great. Well, could you dive into some more details regarding that 2024 drill program? How long will you be running it for? And maybe expand a little bit on the end goal that you're looking for with that program.
Yeah, so the drilling, typically we run from May to October, and the goals here are, I've categorized it into 3 buckets. So the first bucket is, when you're in the stock market, I think it's all about growth. Whether you're Nike or you're Tesla, you need to show a path of growth. And so a third of my focus is trying to make new discoveries. And I've got one of the best teams in the business that know these rocks. They've made discoveries here. So they're going out and they're trying to take all the knowledge that we've had over this 100-year history of this project, specifically our last 4 years where we've hit it really hard. We've put over $50 million into the ground. And to take all that discovery knowledge and all these, the geochemistry, the geophysics, the geology, and try to wrap that into a new discovery. So a third of the program is high risk, high return. And then 2/3 of the program is we've already established a very large resource base. So how do we make that a saleable project? How do we make it attractive to a larger mining company who'd want to come in at a premium and acquire us, or to produce an economic study ourselves where we could advance it? And so I would describe that as de-risking. So we've got the discovery potential, we're de-risking, and then the third component is the expansion and extension. So looking at these past producing mines, looking at these deposits, and looking at where they're open and drilling to see if the mineralization expands and extends. So there's a couple of names I'm going to throw out at you from the project specifically. So the Wolf deposit has been an area where we've seen a lot of silver growth. I've actually got a little wolf here, a little Dolly Varden wolf here. It's a squeeze toy. But so, for those stressful days where silver's down. So we've got the Wolf deposit, and then and the Wolf's been incredible. We're hitting 25, 30 meters of 380 to 460 grams silver. So it's like I look and I study silver projects all the time. Like yesterday, I spent my entire morning going through silver drill intercepts, and I can't find anything that looks like Wolf. And it was a young geologist, Amanda Bennett, who came in here and went through all the historic data and said, we need to go and we need to try to expand and extend this. And she was successful, and my hat's off to her for that. And then the other area is Homestake. So Homestake, 25 meters of 46 grams of gold, 12 meters of 80 grams of gold, 93 meters of 357 grams of silver equivalent, half silver, half gold. So that's another main area. So Homestake is the center of gravity, and then the Torbert horizon extending up to the Wolf deposit. So those are areas will produce results. But I'm hoping to talk about new areas this year on that new discovery side, where I can say, oh, I think we have another Homestake, or, oh, I think we have another Wolf. And I think that would give us the most traction in the market.
You mentioned in a recent interview with Rick Rule that a lot of the major gold producers in the Golden Triangle started as silver producers, and that you see a similar path being possible for Dolly Varden. So walk us through that.
Yeah, listen, there was a very famous mining group, the Hunter Dickinson Group, and Bob Hunter's son, Scott Hunter, is a friend. Scott is an investment advisor at Haywood Securities. I've known Scott for maybe 20 years, and Scott shared with me this idea 20 years ago that, explorers, whether they're explorers at the famous Premier Mine that operated in the 20s, or whether it was at Eskay Creek, which was discovered in 1989, or recently the Premier Mine, the Brucejack Mine that Newmont's operating, the initial discoveries were silver discoveries. Like Brucejack was actually in silver standard. And so what starts as a silver mine in the Golden Triangle, as the explorers vector into the heat source, they're not remembered as silver mines. They're remembered as the greatest gold mines on the planet. So I was always intrigued with Dolly because it was 99% silver. It was all silver, and it was in the Golden Triangle. And I thought, I wonder if this is gonna play out like Premier, like Eskay Creek, like Brucejack. And it was last season where, as we moved from the silver south, where the Torbert mine is, the Dolly Varden mine, Wolf, and others, we went up to Homestake and we drilled a hole that was half silver, half gold. It was almost 100 meters, 93.5 meters of 200 grams of silver, Like that in and of itself, I would have been happy with. But it also carried 2 grams of gold. And I thought, very interesting. That's a silver equivalent of 357 grams of silver over 93 meters. But then we stepped out and we hit a gold zone where we hit 12 and a half meters of 79 grams of gold. And I thought, wow, this is now we're vectoring into that heat source. So we'll see. Like this is the homestake drilling, the following up and chasing that new gold discovery up at homestake is a third of our focus. And we'll be drilling it in and around mid-July. So we started around May 17th with 3 rigs on the exploration side, hitting areas that intrigued me to want to come in and take over as CEO of the company. There was a drill hole in 2019, Jesse, at the Chance deposit. Okay, at Chance, it was 488 grams of silver over 26 and a half meters, and it's never been followed up on. And so we went up to Chance, we went up to some of these other regional discovery-oriented targets, and we focused there. And now we've moved the rigs over to the Wolf deposit. We're delineating a resource, and we're looking to expand it. And then we'll move the rigs up to the ridge by mid-July. And so I anticipate a lot of news. And, we've been blessed over the last 3 seasons to have made some pretty significant discoveries. The last 2 seasons, the best the Golden Triangle has seen. And so we've got a lot to live up to. And the nice thing for the shareholders, though, is the company's got $20 million in the bank. We've got shareholders like Hecla, Eric Sprott. We're 50% held by institutions. So if you're looking at Dolly Varden, you're in really good company. There's no debt. And you've got this high-grade resource. So anything that we find, I think it's actually gravy. But that gravy is going to be the difference between this company trading at a $300 million value and $1 billion.
What is the end goal for the company here? Is it to advance to production yourselves eventually, or is it to be acquired? And in either case, what does that timeline look like for you?
It's a really good question. So the company could have been acquired in 2016. It was subject to a hostile takeover attempt that the shareholders turned down. There was actually 2 companies that came for Dolly Varden. One of them was Skeena Resources. The other was Hecla Mining. And so the companies successfully fought off takeover bids in the past because the company didn't believe at the time that it had the right valuation. Now, under the new management and under the new stewardship, the company has grown from a $20 million company to a $320 million company. And we think there's a lot more work to do, and we're just starting to understand the geology, and we're starting to come up with some good geological models that are enabling new discoveries. So, and we appreciate how rare what we have is. Like we often describe it as a unicorn, and with a team that's got collective experience of hundreds of years in the mining space, we don't say that lightly. But we have a high-grade primary silver mine in a safe location. They're very, very hard to find. And so to answer your question, it may sound like a corny response, but it's the truth. We ask ourselves what's in the best interest of the shareholder at every decision we make. And if that means advancing this project ourselves, we will do that. If it means a bid comes in and we like the bid and we think we're getting a fair value, we will make that recommendation. But ultimately, anybody who's in the business and just puts themselves up for sale, you have to ask yourself why, right? So at this point, our focus is organic growth. Our focus is we believe we can find a lot more, that we have some of the greatest prospective geology in the world, and we now have the team, we now have the capital, and we're now in a price environment where, when I first started, I was looking at silver with a $16 handle. And we're in a totally different price environment today. And so that's going to factor into economics. That's going to factor into cost of capital and dilution. And so, to answer your question, we would be open to both, driving it forward ourselves and also selling it. It all depends on the terms.
And is there anything that we haven't covered on Dolly Varden Silver that you think it's important for shareholders, potential shareholders, people out there looking at the company to keep in mind?
The only thing I could say is, taking a step back from Dolly and looking at the opportunity that exists today in silver and looking at where the silver price is. And, depending upon your risk appetite, whether that means you should go out and buy some bullion or get some coins, or whether that means going out and owning a company that's producing silver, or maybe a royalty company that has exposure to silver. But if you're looking for a growth stock, if you're looking for leverage, silver provides leverage on gold. We've seen 3x outperformance historically, silver to gold in bull markets. Gold goes up 20%, silver goes up 60%. But what gives the most leverage is silver equities. So silver equities will outperform silver price by the same margin that silver will outperform gold. So if you're looking for real torque, and that's where, even for the less patient investors, the bull market's begun, where it's on. We've got record high prices in multiple metals, and silver typically lags, and then it outperforms. So the setup is now, and I've banged my thumb on, or my palm on the table, and I've said, a couple of times, back in September, silver was $20. The year before it was 18. And I was pretty adamant that you needed to go all in on some of these silver equities. And we've seen them double. We've seen the good silver equities double in price since September. And so I think on this pullback now, we're seeing a little bit of a correction here, which is totally normal. We've had a big run in gold. Seasonally, June is a weak month for gold. But I think the strength of this market and the resilience of this market, these corrections will be bought and they will be short. And so I think this is a really interesting time over the summer before August to get exposed.
Awesome. Some great thoughts and great insight, Shawn. Really appreciate you coming on the show. I'm going to put a link in the description below to the Dolly Varden website as well as social media profile for those who want to learn more about the company. Thank you once again, Shawn, for coming on and sharing your knowledge with the audience.
Thanks for having me, Jesse.
Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.